Hi everyone. It's a little after 5:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. But I'm Meredith Harris. I'm a second-year MBA student here at Georgetown, and I'm so excited to welcome all of you to our discussion tonight with Seth Goldman. We are incredibly fortunate to have him here with us tonight, so thank you again, Seth, so much for taking the time to be here. Over the summer, Ethan and I had the opportunity to work with Seth at Plant Burger, which is a mission-driven, quick-service restaurant with amazing food. If you haven't tried it yet, you'll have a chance to right after this discussion in Connolly Commons, and you'll learn more about it tonight. But Seth co-founded Plant Burger, and he's CEO of Eat the Change. In addition to his involvement with those two companies, he co-founded Honest Tea, and he serves as chair of the board at Beyond Meat. All of these businesses are great examples of how much potential companies of all sizes really have to make a positive impact on everything from human health to environmental health. They're all very inspiring, so there's a lot to talk about here, and we're so thrilled to be hosting this event with Net Impact, Business for Impact, and the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Initiative. So I'm going to turn it over to Ethan now, who's going to talk a little more about Seth's background and the structure of this event.
Thank you, Meredith. And then again, we are incredibly fortunate to have Seth here on campus, not only because of his role at Plant Burger, but because Seth truly embodies the Georgetown Cura Personalis spirit. But before we go further into Seth's background, none of this would be possible without the sponsors that Meredith just previously mentioned. An extra special shout out that this event is part of the Paul and Carol Hill Speaker Series. Their contribution is what makes events like this possible, and without them, none of this, whether it's having Seth Goldman on campus or Doug Bouton of Halo Top in previous years, would not be possible. And extra special thanks, because Meredith and I pitched this chaotic idea, not expecting a lot to come out of it, but these organizations really jumped on board and eagerly were excited to have Seth back on campus. And if you're curious learning about more of any of the organizations, whether it be Net Impact, Georgetown Entrepreneurship Initiative, or Business for Impact, you can go to their websites and learn more about how they support the Georgetown community and really support the community writ large. So about Seth's background, he grew up in the Boston area, attending Harvard for his undergraduate studies before completing his MBA at the Yale School of Management. Pre and post business school, Seth has had an incredibly diverse career, ranging from teaching English in Moscow to working in the world of politics, serving in Michael Dukakis's 1988 presidential campaign, and then serving as the deputy press secretary for Senator Lloyd Bentsen of Texas. After completing his MBA, Seth noticed a big gap in the beverage space, where there weren't any options between sugary soft drinks and water. With his former marketing professor at Yale, Barry Nailbuff, Seth co-founded Honest Tea. But he didn't stop there. Seth was involved early with Beyond Meat, working with CEO Ethan Brown and the management team seeing the company through their IPO. Seth is currently the chair of board of Beyond Meat, and since then has founded two groundbreaking plant-based companies, both Plant Burger and Eat the Change. As Meredith mentioned, Plant Burger is a mission-driven, quick-service restaurant serving entirely plant-based foods in a familiar format to customers in a healthier and planet-friendlier manner. We like to say that Plant Burger is fast food for the future. Seth is currently a chief change agent at Eat the Change. Eat the Change combines marketplace solutions with education and activism to empower consumers to make dietary choices aligned with their concern around climate and health. They are currently releasing a variety of plant-based snacks, amongst many other efforts, including investing in community-based organizations dedicated to improving the health of local populations and local ecosystems. Moderating this discussion today is Jeff Reid. Jeff is professor here at the Business School at Georgetown and has dedicated himself to entrepreneurship and supporting students in their entrepreneurial endeavors, founding and serving as the director of the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Initiative. The format of today's discussion is as follows. We'll be around 30-40 minutes of discussion, followed by 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A. And for the Q&A, please do have a question. Please no monologues with fancy B-School lingo. We want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to answer or ask their questions. And there will be a reception that follows this conversation in Connolly Commons, which is on the third floor, directly right above us. For those who do not know where it is, you'll make a right outside here, go up the steps, and you will follow other students who are on the way. So it should be very, very easy to find. In regards to the food, again, be conscious of others and allow everyone to get first and seconds, or allow everyone to get first before moving on to seconds. We ordered a ton of food, so I hope you all are hungry, but we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to try everything they kind of want before going back for more. And if the package is clean, we made sure everything's individually packaged to be COVID compliant. If the package doesn't have any foodstuffs on it, please do recycle that because we want to make sure that we're being as planet friendly as humanly possible. Now please put your hands together and give Seth Reid, Seth Goldman and Jeff Reid a Georgetown welcome.
Thank you so much to Ethan and Meredith for really making this event possible. And thank you to Bill Novelli and our friends at Business for Impact and the Net Impact Club. And as mentioned, Paul and Carol Hill, who endowed this speaker series. And most of all, thanks to Seth for being here.
Glad to be
here.
here.
Welcome to Georgetown.
Thank you.
I know you speak here often enough. We probably need to get you tenure maybe. But let's start off by talking about this intersection of business and social impact, right? You've had a long career, including Calvert, which was one of the early social investment funds, and you heard about honesty, and we're going to hear a lot about the new things. But as a student, as an MBA student at Yale, you helped launch something there. Can you describe kind of how you found that intersection of business and social impact, even as a student?
Yeah, I've always considered myself an activist more than anything else, and business is just kind of the vehicle for it. So when my first case study at Yale it was called the Rainforest Crunch. It was a spin-off of Ben & Jerry's where they tried to do positive things for the rainforest, launching a product, and the business failed. But it really sparked my imagination that I actually came to business school from a nonprofit background, and I thought I was going to go back into nonprofit. And I said, wait a minute, there's actually a way to pursue causes I care about in the marketplace, and if you succeed, they can become self-sustaining. You don't always have to raise money for it. The marketplace funds itself if you succeed. And that whole approach really excited me, and I realized that a lot of the other people I was seeing in business school may not have put it together that way, but they definitely wanted to feel like they were doing something positive. And so in 1993, when I started at the Yale School of Management, there was the first, what was then called Students for Responsible Business, but what became Net Impact, the first conference ever convened. Yep. And it was convened in at Georgetown, by the way. So 50 people gathered here, and Ben Cohen of Ben & Jerry's came down and sort of got everyone fired up. And for family reasons, I actually wasn't able to be there in person, but I got so inspired by the conversation that happened and what I heard about it that I launched the Yale chapter of what became Net Impact, and I also was on the founding board. And it's exciting to see how that group of 50 people has grown to a really international organization. And like a lot of the things we'll talk about, a lot of these themes, and one reason I've always admired the work that Bill does is how do you build a movement? How do you take an idea, give it, I'll use the word meat, but how do you create filler? How do you give it heft? And then how do you scale it?
Plant-based alternative
Plant-based
hefts,
alternative meat, yeah. I love plant-based meat. But how do you scale it? How do you take it beyond a convenient or niche idea that some folks on an extremist side are interested in? Mm-hmm. And how do you make it part of mainstream life? And so whether it's this approach to business, or less sweet drinks, or organic, or fair trade, or plant-based protein, or planet-friendly eating, how do we do that? And that's work I love to do, and like a lot of the work that Bill has done, there's a lot of marketing involved, but there's also a lot of sociology and psychology, and there's also a lot of critical work done around the product itself, right? If Net Impact were a quaint idea, but it didn't lead to MBA students getting jobs, then that product is not a product that delivers, right? If Beyond Meat
Honesty is just a tad sweet,
yeah,
right?
But if it doesn't taste good, so it's less sweet, but if it doesn't satisfy someone's taste, you don't sell. And if Beyond Meat is an interesting idea, we could avoid killing animals, we could help the climate, but it doesn't taste as good or it's not as nutritious, people aren't going to buy it. So you've really got to address, it's the whole package. And obviously when we look at history, the campaigns that have come to their full impact are the ones that deliver on all of those things.
Well, and so you figured all that out as a student, right? Your first year in business
No,
school.
I recognized that was an opportunity,
Yeah.
and that was something I could get excited about. And like any good campaign, the time to get involved is before it's a mainstream idea. And with net impact, so Yale has always been a progressive school, but it was always, even then people were like, oh, wait, what's this idea? And at the first net impact conferences we would hold, so the first year was 50 people, the next conference was about 100 people, but within that there were maybe 2 or 3 people from each school. And each of those people felt like, I'm the one on the fringe of the school. I'm
Right.
sort of the person who feels like, this isn't the mainstream business school education, but I want to be part of a community. And so it's those folks who are willing to take those early steps, the innovators, who commit. And that's like when you're in a movement, if you want to be a leader of a movement, you want to get there early.
Right, and you accept help from wherever direction it
Absolutely.
might come, right?
Yeah.
And so it is interesting to see how some attitudes have changed, right? In 25 or so years within business schools now, this idea that profit is the only motivator of a business organization, and within society at large, we've seen some shifting over time.
Well, not just business schools, but corporate America. I mean, as terrible as the pandemic has been, one of the exciting things is the takeaway that business now recognizes they have to think about diversity and inclusion in a different way. They have to think about their environmental impact in a different way. And frankly, every organization has to think about these things in a different way, and that's a good thing.
Yep.
So it's kind of widened the aperture for everyone's set of responsibilities. And so I remember, Eat the Change, when we were getting started, we didn't even have a product. We basically had 1 or 2 people, but we put out a statement around Black Lives Matter, and like, why would a company that's focused on environmental health for food be talking about Black Lives Matter? Like, something we care about, we're going to talk about. We're not going to sort of rope off these. We're not going to let ourselves be constrained by only sticking to what is at the core of our business. We're going to express our values wherever we have the chance.
Well, and so we see customer behavior changing. Customers like to buy things from companies that share their values.
Right.
Employment, similarly, students or graduates who
Right.
they're going to work for an organization they care about. Those things have changed a lot over time. And now we're seeing investors also change.
Yeah.
Right? And you were at Calvert, which was an early leader in social impact investing.
Yeah, probably too early. So there's the leading edge and the bleeding edge. Calvert was the bleeding edge, and we were trying to build that movement. And now, of course, ESG investing is mainstream, and there's billions of assets. But at the time, we were early on it, and it was hard to make the case. And Calvert's still around, but they kind of they were the first mover, but they're not the leader the way the chance they had. So it's one of the interesting themes too is just because you go first doesn't mean you own it. And so Beyond Meat, we were the first to market with plant-based meat, and as you know, there are other competitors, but we've got to continue to innovate to stay ahead. And with Honest Tea, we were the first to make organic bottled tea, and we were the first to make fair trade certified bottled tea, and the first to successfully commercialize a less sweet drink. But just because you're first doesn't mean you have the privilege or that you get to keep it. You've got to continue to be innovating and pushing the envelope.
Execution and constant innovation.
Yeah.
It's not just about the idea, right?
That's right.
So let's get into the entrepreneurial side. This is my favorite part, right? So for those who don't know, the founding story of Honest Tea is there's a lot to it, right? I got my copy of the book here, which I'll plug, right? Mission in a Bottle. It's got a lot of pictures in it.
It's a comic book.
It's a comic book, yeah. And students in my classes read this often. But tell us, so first of all, I appreciate the fact that you started the company with your college professor, with your business school professor.
Yeah.
Right? So you guys were co-founders. How did this business get started?
Yeah, the idea started in the classroom. I mean, we were doing a case study of Coke versus Pepsi, and Barry Nailbuff, my co-founder, asked the question, is there anything missing in the competitive landscape? Coke and Pepsi were competing, Coke versus Pepsi, and basically their competition was just soda against soda, cola versus cola. And so I said, well, the thing that's missing is they're competing on a plane when it could be a 3D competition. So, okay, we can have a debate about which tastes better, but they're basically still brown fizzy water with high fructose corn syrup. So they're really not that different.
Not that much different.
Where it becomes different and interesting is when you sweeten something differently or with less calories, or you use an organic ingredient. You can package it differently. That's when you sort of open up what the competition is, And so we agreed, well, and then Barry said, well, what would be an example of something you would launch? And we recognized that a less sweet drink would be an interesting idea. We didn't do too much about, other than say we both agreed on this idea.
Okay.
And then I, like a lot of you, I was in my second year of business school, and I'm like, I got to find a job. So I'm not going to launch this company, especially back in 1995. Not to mention I had no experience in the beverage industry. And it was only after I came down here, worked for Calvert, and went for a run in Central Park after a business presentation, and then was thirsty, and then I said, there's still nothing in this cooler that is going to satisfy my thirst. I reached back out to Barry. I said, I think I am ready to do something about this now. And Barry had just come back from India, where he had done a case study of the tea industry, and he'd come up with the name Honest Tea, and that kind of like, wow, all right, that's a beautiful name to go after a healthier, transparent, authentic beverage. And so I left my day job. He kept his. He's still a professor at Yale, but he became the co-founder, chairman of the board, and I was the TEO. And we had a great run. At my first sale, he came down to our house in Bethesda, and we brewed up 5 thermoses of tea, and we got an empty Snapple bottle. We pasted a label on and went to Whole Foods and said, I want to sell this in your stores. At the time, there were just 17 Whole Foods stores here in the Mid-Atlantic. And they said, well, we'll give it a try. And they ordered 15,000 bottles, which felt just like terrifying to me because I'd only made it in my kitchen. But we got on the shelf, and in fact, our first intern, we had 2 net impact interns. One was from Maryland, and one was from Georgetown. So
they helped fill those bottles. And
they
helped
sample the bottles. They
Okay.
came to the bottling plant as well, but I'm happy to say we did not make the tea in my house. We did find a bottling
Gotcha.
plant that was down on its luck and gave us a try.
Well, and the company, I mean, there's a lot of ups and downs, a lot of stories. I've heard you tell over the years about that company's growth.
Yeah.
Are
Somebody read the book. They said, it kind of read like a horror story.
And there was a scene when you were about to run off the road in a snowstorm.
I did run
and-
off the road. Yeah, it was bad.
and
No,
problems with the bottling plant, and you have a young
Broken
family,
glass, yeah,
and
yeah.
so it's been okay. So, are there a couple of stories out of that you want to share that kind of help?
Well, one reason we really wanted, it's very easy to read these how I did it kind of books and just feel like, oh, these guys just sort of had an idea and they got lucky. And I hope what comes across is there's a lot of work involved and that these things don't happen in isolation. So one of the defining moments for me, I mentioned that, we were brewing the tea in my kitchen. The day that Barry and I were brewing the samples for Whole Foods in our kitchen, my wife comes in the house with our son who was 4 years, we have 3 sons, but at the time one of them was 4 years old. And my wife had this, ashen look on her face, and I'm like, oh no, she likes a orderly house. I said, well, we're gonna clean this up. She said, no, I need to talk to you. And she explained that our son, Ellie, had just been diagnosed with a serious cardiac condition that was going to require major surgery within just a few weeks. And so, on the one hand, I'm just shell-shocked, and yet at the same time, I gotta make these samples. I've got my, the defining sales call of the whole company the next day. And frankly, if she had that news, if Ellie had gone for his checkup, 3 or 4 weeks earlier, I might not have launched the business. I might just said, boy, this isn't the time to go out being a cowboy, selling bottles of tea. I got to stay in my investment business work, and but I was where I was, and so I made the sale and got the order. But then spent the next few weeks with Ellie tag teaming with my wife and I in the hospital, Children's Hospital, while he went through the surgery. And he's today a healthy 28-year-old who just finished a triathlon and is doing great. But that was a defining event for sure. And then I think another key moment was our decision to sell to CocaCola, how we handled that. And it was interesting because I was talking to Bill about the fact that Honest Tea today is really very much the same brand that we built. A lot of times a founder launches a business. I had a classic conversation with one of the Toms from Nantucket Nectars, and he was telling me how he looked at the website he had sold Nantucket Nectars first to Ocean Spray, and then to Snapple, and then to Dr. Pepper 7-Up, and then to eventually what became Keurig. And he looked at the website, and the Nantucket Nectars website had a picture of a ferry boat. He says, there's no ferry boats in Nantucket Harbor. And so that was sort of how far away they'd gotten from the roots of the brand. But Honest Tea today is very much the same brand. And my name is still on the bottle, but I'm as proud of it as I was because it is still organic, still fair trade certified. It's the same calorie content, and so this goal of democratizing organics, which is why we chose to partner with Coca-Cola, is happening. And Honest Kids, our organic kids drink, is available at Wendy's and Chick-fil-A and Subway and McDonald's. And then I just saw it at Arby's too. So it's still going on without me, and I still feel good about that decision.
Well, that's great. I remember one of the first times I heard you speak here was shortly after that transaction, right?
Yeah.
Coca-Cola bought a piece of the business,
That's
and
right.
then over time
Yeah.
they bought the whole thing, and I could tell then, and you write about it in the book too, that it was a tough decision, right? Because Coca-Cola was kind of the evil empire, right? That's big sugar.
Yeah,
But there's always it's part of capitalism.
There's risk, right? You build this thing, and it's not too much to say it feels like a child, because it does. You birth it, you put blood, sweat, and tears into it, I mean, there's no question my actual sons are more precious to me than Honest Tea, but they certainly think of Honest Tea as like a fourth brother, because it was around and it defined a lot of our lives. So you do want to make sure it goes well, and it's one of the reasons. So Honest Tea, we sold when we took our first investment from Coke when they were 10, and then when Honest Tea I was 10 years old, and then they bought it when it was 13. But I stayed around through 2019, so basically until Honest Tea was 21. Yeah. And just like a son, I couldn't follow my son, I couldn't hang around my sons in college, but I was able to still really guide and shape Honest Tea. And there were more than one occasion where I had to advocate to keep it honest. And to Coke's credit, they listened to me. I wasn't there as window dressing. I actually and that's one of the differences that, not whether it's Nantucket Nectars or a lot of these other brands, once the business is sold, the entrepreneur will go do the next thing and not necessarily ensure that the roots take hold.
Well, that's to the credit of Coca-Cola, right? They saw trends changing.
Yeah.
They when they chose to invest and buy Honest Tea, they knew it was different than what they had currently
That's
done.
right, and they also knew the entrepreneurial approach was different too. So it wasn't just the values; it was this whole approach to business. And we'd have conversations about things, and sometimes I'd say, "Well, I don't want to do that," and they say, "Well, where's the market research?" It's my gut. I don't have to research what my gut tells me, and.
They have like 50 employees that are like, oh, that's our jobs to do
that
research.
We had a classic. So when we were helping launch Honest Kids within the Minute Maid system, which is Coke's warehouse distribution system, they came to me and they were all concerned because we don't know how to tell you this, but we did some market research and we learned that Honest Kids is not the preferred drink among the target consumer. Which is kids. I said, well, I could have told you that. You wasted your money on market research. The whole point of Honest Kids is to not taste as sweet. And any self-respecting kid is going to want the sweet. What you really want to understand is, does the kid reject it? If it's the only thing in the lunchbox, is the kid going to drink it? And the answer is yes, the kid will drink it. And that's
because it's the parent that's making the purchase decision.
That's right. And they just didn't do that research. And of course, it's done extremely well.
We had a Georgetown executive student who was in charge of some supply chain programs for Coca-Cola, and he told me then that one of the impacts that you had was changing their bottles.
Oh,
right,
yeah.
To use less plastic.
Yeah, trying
and
to.
You guys already had millions of bottles, and they had tens or hundreds of millions of bottles every year that now use less plastic because of the work you did. So that's one of the ways that your company changed the bigger mothership, right?
It's good to hear.
Well, and impact is something that we talk about a lot, but measuring it is often difficult.
It is.
Whether it's the Honest Tea impact or any of the other businesses, how do you kind of measure the impact beyond the financial returns?
This is going to be a disappointing answer for people who really like to get into the weeds, but for me, I start with the product itself. And so I know Honest Tea, we're sourcing organic, we're sourcing fair trade, and it's less sweet. So I know that along those three areas, those three things that I care about, we're always going to be a better option than the mainstream or conventional option. And with Beyond Meat, we know that our burger uses 99% less water, 93% less land, 90% fewer greenhouse gases are created. That's been third-party, verified by the University of Michigan life cycle analysis. So then the goal is to just sell as much of it as you can and continue to improve what you're doing. That said, Beyond Meat will be doing a much more formal impact, but for the other businesses I'm in, we're too small to be, I don't want to say contemplating our navel. We have to ingrain the impact in the product and in the service. And if we do that right, then all the rest of those things will take care of themselves.
If you get it right for every unit, and you sell millions of units, you're doing something great.
That's it. Now, that said, we still sell a lot of single-use packages, and they are recyclable, and we say to recycle them, but we know that over 70% of them are not recycled. So that's still a not positive impact. As you said, we try to lightweight them as much as we can or find alternative materials, but those are real impacts that are part of what we're doing as well.
All right, so you've mentioned some of the other businesses. There's Eat the Change and Beyond Meat. I asked you a bunch of questions about the origin story of Honest Tea.
Yeah.
How did you get into the meat business?
Yeah.
And talk about these new ones.
Along the way, back in, I think, 2002, I was approached, actually, the CEO of Whole Foods put me in touch with a woman entrepreneur who was trying to launch an organic baby food company. And her name was Shazi Visram, and I actually helped connect her with a woman named Jessica Ralph, who became her co-founder. They launched Happy Baby Organic Baby Food, and I was the sort of the founding board member. And I really loved helping them scale and grow the business, and that for me, and then they ended up selling to Danone, which was a good outcome for them because they once again wanted to democratize organic baby food. But at the time that they sold was also around the time that Honest Tea sold to Coke, and so I'm like, all right, I think I'm still Honest Tea for sure, but I want to find some new challenges to get involved with. And in 2012, my wife read an article. It happened to be on her birthday because you'll sort of see how it plays into the story, about this company getting started on the West Coast that was trying to replicate the taste and texture of meat using only plants. And our family had been vegetarian since, 16 years ago, so back in like 2005. But we were always happy as vegetarians from an ethical perspective, but frequently disappointed from a culinary perspective. We'd eat veggie burgers, or we go to a barbecue, we bring Boca burgers, and it's like just not as good. And so when my wife read this article about Beyond Meat getting started, she said, "Boy, if this company can succeed, it would be the best birthday present ever." And so I sent an email to info@beyondmeat.com and said, "Just read this article about your business. If there's any way I can help, I'd love to." And they needed some help, so I got involved as an advisor and then became a board member. And then in 2015, as my role at CocaCola was changing, I proposed, and thankfully Coca-Cola accepted, that I shift from being a full-time employee of Coca-Cola and Honest Tea to half-time, and I spent the other half as executive chair of the board of Beyond Meat. And so got to really get involved in strategy decisions for the business, growing the business, taking it international, obviously financing the business leading up to the IPO, and just helping the company navigate really fast growth. So it's been tons of fun, and I'm still very involved and very committed. It's not a full-time job anymore or even a half-time job, but it is still something I care a great deal about, and really important work for health, for the planet, and certainly for resources, constraints in the world.
And I encourage everyone. I know we've got some plant burgers today, but some of those are made with Beyond Meat
for sure.
Right?
Yeah, so people
give it a try. I'm a customer, and I like it. And I think you're 100% right. Like, if it doesn't taste and feel like regular meat, fewer people will eat it. Right?
And when I first tasted Beyond Meat, this was back in 2012. I saw potential, but it didn't taste anything like it does today. And so what I saw was some innovation and tons of potential and passion from both the CEO and the team to continue to innovate. And back then there were about 5 people working on innovation at Beyond Meat. Today there's 125.
Oh wow!
So it's a totally different level of
so it's just going to keep
research.
getting better and better.
It's larger than most university biology departments or plus chemistry departments. But that's what we're doing. And so then in 2017, I was on a panel at George Washington University with Spike Mendelsohn, who's a celebrity chef in DC. And like any good salesperson, I brought along a cooler bag of Honest Tea and Beyond Burgers, and I told Spike, I said, I want you to try these. I'd love to see them carried in your stores. He immediately put Honest Tea in the coolers. But he brought home the Beyond Meat, and I didn't know this, but his wife is vegan. So Spike's a burger chef. He was on Top Chef, and he won, he beat Bobby Flay, or, all these different things. But he said, those burgers are amazing. Would you want to launch a plant-based burger restaurant with me? I said, well, that's a neat idea. I don't know anything about restaurants. Plus, I'm with Honest Tea, CocaCola, and Beyond Meat, so I can't be involved in businesses that would compete with their customers. But I do know some people you should talk to. One of whom is my wife, who has been involved, sort of mostly behind the scenes.
She didn't sign a non-compete agreement.
No, she didn't have to. She didn't. And then the other is my son. My son Jonah was the one who convinced our whole family to become vegetarian. The reason I'm able to date when we became vegetarians is because Jonah's 29. When he was 13 at his bar mitzvah was when he convinced us all to become vegetarian. And so he came back. He had been living in Israel, and he came back to head up the marketing for what became Plant Burger. And I got to cheer them on from the sidelines. But then in 2019, I shifted my role, so I was no longer executive chair of Beyond Meat, but became chair of the board, which is a non-paid role, and also to shift away from Honest Tea at the end of 2019. And so that freed me up to become a co-founder of Plant Burger. And as we were launching Plant Burger, I was saying, well, I can get involved in this, but what's my full-time job? Because I could just be on boards, but I still felt like I want to keep building this movement. And so I was trying to think about, is there a snack I could launch? I didn't want to go back into beverage because all my gray hairs I attribute to the beverage business. It's a tough business, as the book lays out. So what would be a snack, and what would I call it, and what would we do with it? And so as part of the sourcing for Plant Burger, as I said, we have a mushroom bacon barbecue burger. I took the team to visit a mushroom farm that I knew, that I gotten to know through my work in the organic movement. And we found some amazing mushrooms. Mushrooms are an incredible product, and learned about the sourcing. And I was sort of playing around with that in my head, and I asked Spike to start seeing what he could make in terms of a mushroom snack. And then at the same time, Jonah, my son, came up with this great phrase for Plant Burger, and it's on all the menu boards, which is, eat the change you wish to see in the world, which of course is an echo of the phrase attributed to Gandhi. It turns out, by the way, Gandhi did not say, be the change you wish to see in the world. He gave a much larger speech, and somebody sort of paraphrased it, yeah. But that phrase is a very powerful phrase, and for me, eat the change is a call to action. It's a call to accountability. It's a recognition that what we eat is the single biggest impact we have on a daily basis on the planet. So it's great if you bike, it's great if you recycle, it's great if you turn your thermostat down. It all is a rounding error compared to what you put at the center of your plate and what you eat. And so how do we awaken in people, and how do we convert them to have more planet-friendly diets? And of course, the plant-based meat and restaurants are great, but what about a snack that we could create? And so the first snack we created at Eat the Change was mushroom jerky, but now we're sort of looking more broadly. Mushroom jerky is great because it's organic, it's an extremely water-efficient crop, it has a lot of the nutrients you would get with meat, and it lends itself extremely well to a chef because mushrooms are like a blank canvas. They absorb so many different flavors, and so that was a great first product, but we're continuing to innovate and find other ways.
So Jonah helped come up with the phrase,
totally.
Eat the change.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's cool to see how the family has influenced so much of this. Right?
Well, so Honest Kids, I mentioned my son Ellie, the one who had the heart situation. He was the one who encouraged me to launch Honest Kids. He was the one who wanted to bring Honest Tea to school in his lunchbox, and he just was a little guy, and so he'd come home with these half-consumed bottles. He's like, well, and he says, if you don't give me Honest Tea, then you give me these really sweet drinks. And I was giving him Capri Sun, which oh my gosh, what am I doing? And then I realized I should give him, a less sweet drink. So, so Jonah we're launching a product with Eat the Change that Jonah signs, and then Honest Kids was signed by Ellie. So
that's cool, and they're working in the business and helping you.
Well,
right?
Ellie now is launching his own enterprise. It's an education-based company, but they're all like I say, they have different. There's three boys who are natural brothers, but then there's Honest Tea, there's Plant Burger, and now Eat the Change. So
the family keeps growing.
The family's full.
Well, so you've talked about this some, but the huge imperative for the planet, right, to have less meat. Can you just kind of hit home on, and not everybody's going to
Sure.
become a
Yep.
vegetarian or vegan, right? But that's not
Yeah.
really the point
There's
here.
a lot of different ways to think about it, but basically, if the rest of the planet were to eat like the United States eats in terms of what we consume, we would need 2.5 Earths to produce that much. And last time I checked, there's only one Earth. 50%.
Let's just hope we keep that one, right?
Yeah, we're lucky we got that one. 50% of all cropland is used to feed animals. So when people say, there's not enough land out there to feed the world, there is enough land to feed the world. It's just we have to change what we grow. And so the cow and the way we evolved to base our diets on animals is really just, if we were starting with a blank slate and we said, okay, how do we create an efficient agricultural system that gives everybody nutrient-dense food, that's delicious, that's nutritious, you would never start from, well, let's put 50% of our crops into this one thing that then is incredibly inefficient, that as I said, uses 99 times more water, 93% more, or sort of 8x the amount of land. The cow is just not an effective bioprocessor. All animals are, they base their diets on plants. So what if you skip the animal and you take the plants and take the nutrients out of them directly? Then you could actually feed twice as many people. Because if you're using 50% of your cropland to feed animals and you use it differently, you could feed twice as many people. Of course, it's ideal if some of that land is reforested instead of like what we're doing with the rainforest. But so from a resource constraint, that's certainly one of the main arguments. From an environmental perspective, it's extremely destructive. When we look at the sources of greenhouse gases, it's not just the methane released from cows and other animals. It's just that there's so many more creatures. There's literally billions of sentient creatures created, creating more CO2 just because they're alive. So when we think about the impact of greenhouse gases, tremendous impact. The other piece, of course, is our health. Heart disease is the single largest single largest killer in the United States. And so when we look at the role that cholesterol and saturated fat play, consuming foods that are so heavy in those is not something we have to do. And there's even an argument, this is a different argument, and it's not one I sort of make in necessarily a business school audience, but there's the idea that a whole system, our whole diets are based around the raising and slaughtering of billions of sentient creatures, creates a different sort of mindset around the value of life. And it's funny, my wife, and as I said, we just went vegan 2 years ago. We'd been vegetarian until just 2 years ago. But when you sort of take on that feeling that your diet is not destroying other living creatures, it kind of changes your perspective. It does make you think about your relationship to the world and the planet and other creatures in a different way. So it is personally, it's been a really interesting journey I've been on. And one thing I want to say is I'm not at all, and I try not to be, I believe, and I certainly believe our marketing also isn't judgmental. I mean, everyone's on their own journey. We're all acculturated. I mean, one of the things I talk about, my father was one of the most ethical people I've ever known, and yet, his favorite food was veal. And I look back on that, and you can't blame people for being raised in an acculturated, in a norm, living to a norm that was presented to them. It's really only unusual that people break out of it. And it is exciting, and we're at an interesting time where that is being broken up, and people are sort of thinking more expansively. But I certainly don't have any judgment.
But you're part of the movement you're leading doesn't assume that everybody's going to shift and become vegan
Absolutely.
or vegetarian, right?
No, it's all about the flexitarian. We just need, if we can get, so there's less than 5% of the U.S. population is vegan or vegetarian.
So one argument is to try to double that number, right?
Yeah,
if you try to get to
uphill.
10%,
no, that would
maybe
be a
someday,
huge
but
lift,
that's hard.
Huge lift
Yeah.
to do that. But instead, if you got every American to have one more plant-based meal per week, so 1 out of 21, that's roughly 5%. That would effectively be the same as doubling the amount of vegans or vegetarians. and in a way that's much more accessible.
And through Beyond Meat and Plant Burger and Eat the Change, there's
That's
so
right.
many options, right?
That's right, yeah.
And,
The goal is to make the options fun, delicious, accessible, make them relevant, and aspirational.
Well, and this is part of a larger movement. In the news I read today, I guess a few days ago, one of your competitors, Impossible, raised another $500 million. They've
Right.
raised over $2 billion, and
Right.
they might they're rumored to have a $10 billion IPO coming soon, right? I mean, that's a sign that investors
Yeah.
see this as an opportunity, and I assume the whole category is growing,
Yeah,
and that's a
for
good
sure.
thing, right? So how do you see your competitive position, and what do you think kind of the next
Yeah,
steps are?
I mean, we're cheering for everybody here to grow this. This is not, there's not going to be one brand that's going to change everyone's diet. It's got to be a movement. And so the competition really is the meat industry, the animal-based meat industry. And the way I look at it, and we presented this narrative during the roadshow for the IPO, plant-based dairy, at least at the time of the IPO, was about 13% of the dairy category. Of course, 20 years ago, it was 0%. Yeah. And actually today it's 16%. Plant-based meat is less than 1%. Today it's about 1% of the meat category, and meat is a much larger category. So it's our point of view that we should be able to grow to 13 to 16% of the category to become plant-based within a matter of years.
And that is a huge
It's a
huge
It's a
market.
big prize,
Yeah.
right? Well, $200 billion category, so you're talking about a $26 billion prize that still can grow. And that, at the time, right now, plant-based meat is still, it keeps narrowing the gap. We're still not there on taste, but it's getting closer. You'll be able to taste it tonight. Nutritionally, it's already better. Environmentally, it's already better. Cost-wise, it's more, but within the next 5 years, we expect to underprice. So then, as you keep closing these gaps, the size of the opportunity. The other thing that happens, and we've already seen some trickles of this start to happen, when we start launching these products in mainstream restaurants. I mean, not just, TGI Fridays or Denny's, but in McDonald's and in Yum Brands outlets. Then all of a sudden, you start to really make these things accessible. We saw that with Honest Kids, and that's when, once again, you're democratizing the impact.
Awesome. Well, I do want to encourage our audience to ask questions. We have a microphone in each aisle. If you just line up, we'll take questions from folks here. While you guys are thinking of your question, I have, I'll have a couple more, I guess. So if somebody wants to eat any of these products now, besides our reception coming up in a few minutes, where can they find the different options?
So Plant Burger, we have 9 stores in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania area. So they're all located inside of Whole Foods. We're launching one in New York next month, in January, so next year. Eat the Change is available in all Whole Foods stores and in selected Giants. We've just launched a new product for Eat the Change it's just starting to trickle into the Whole Foods stores, but I'll just give you the sense of it. The goal was to create a snack for kids that would be analogous to Honest Kids. So as I said, Honest Kids grabbed the lunchbox and parents started spreading it. Could we find a product a kid would like that a parent would immediately understand why it was better? So Honest Kids, they got it, 40 calories versus 100, no high fructose corn syrup versus organic, easy to understand. And with this new product, it's a carrot-based snack that we're selling to kids. So it'll be contrasted with a fruit snack, which isn't fruit at all. Those fruit snacks are not fruit at all.
It's just all sugar.
So when a parent sees that and says actual, full serving of carrots, excellent source of vitamin A, 60 calories versus an 80-calorie gummy bear snack, which is called a fruit snack. So we're real excited about that, and that's just starting to hit the shelves in Whole Foods.
Excellent. We got our first question here.
Hi, Roy. Yeah.
Thank you for the great conversation. I find it very inspirational how you moved from finance to finding companies entrepreneurship. So making that jump, was there like a bunch of books that people you aspire to, or like, you know what I mean? Because I mean, I'm an entrepreneur myself, and I always look for what is that kind of inspired you to make that jump.
That's a good question. And here's a funny story. So, I had been at Calvert in finance, and I was talking to Barry all the time, and I said, there's a little workshop for entrepreneurs going on in Bethesda at the library, and then I realized, wait a minute, I went to business school for 2 years. Like, that's what That's what I'm supposed to learn. That's what you're being, So the real, just part of it's just gaining the confidence. Like what you're doing here, these years you've invested in, is to train your mind to analyze and execute. And so now it's fair to say at the time when I was in business school, they didn't have nearly the level of entrepreneurial studies that you're building here.
It's great now.
Which
That's
is
right.
great. Yeah, but
no, you're right. We can't teach everything, right?
you can't teach everything, but that's the whole point. Like entrepreneurs aren't supposed to know everything. Like I had no experience in the beverage industry. You know what?
You got to have a comfort with ambiguity
Exactly.
and not knowing the answer.
What you can do in business school, and this I did do, is participate in a business plan.
We have pitch competitions.
Yeah, pitch competition. So I did it for a biotechnology company. Obviously, I didn't pursue that, but going through that process helps you understand: do you have the appetite for it? Do you have the aptitude for it? And I did. And so you're never going to be. So yes, I do read. I don't want to shortchange your question. I do read a lot, and I do find those helpful. But there's never going to what your 2 years or whatever you're doing invested here is the single best preparation you can take for that. That said,
we did invite our general student body, so there might be folks that aren't MBAs here too.
Yeah, well then go to business school or take your entrepreneurial courses.
That's right. We do have entrepreneurship classes.
Yeah, and like I say, I went to business school thinking I was coming out as a nonprofit entrepreneur, and by the way, that was really helpful because for the first 10 years, Honest Tea was a nonprofit, and
not by
design. So being able to operate that way is important too. Yeah.
Excellent. So we have a few more questions, and we probably won't have time for any more, so we'll try to get to the other three people, but nobody else needs to line up, I guess. We'll go to this way, and then we'll come back here.
Hi, this is Audrey Voorhees, actually alum of your 2022, so you invited alums. Thank you for doing that. My question is around the power of consumers as a player in tipping the movement.
Yeah.
So in terms of increasing environmental choices and adoption, there's several different angles you can play that from. You explored investing angle and consumers, so curious about the power and limitations of consumers for increasing environmental impact.
Huge. It's a critical question. Consumers are omnipotent. They are the power. Basically, they are, I want to say they're the only power because I'll share some other things along the way, but if the consumers don't respond to what we're selling, that dies. It literally, I could have a great relationship with the buyer from Whole Foods or Giant, and I do, but if the consumers don't buy the product, they're not going to keep it on there. It's just, it is a law of the marketplace, that it's ruthless. So it's all about the consumers, and when the consumers want something and they ask for something, the retailer and the restaurants respond, and that's what's been so amazing about Beyond Meat when we do these launches and people line up. I was just out in LA last month and we launched in McDonald's in a select number of stores, and to see how consumers responded, the manager was so excited, and she was like, I want this in my whole region, because that's what, they respond to consumers. When we go back to Honest Kids launching in McDonald's, of course it was great McDonald's did. I give them credit and I give CocaCola credit, but they wouldn't have done it if consumers hadn't indicated they wanted something healthier on the menu. So it really does, it doesn't always begin with consumers. You have to train the consumer, but it certainly will end if the consumers don't come on board. One of the other interesting cases of another powerful role player is the buyer. So at Whole Foods, they were the first chain to take Beyond Meat and move it out of the freezer and put it in the meat section of the grocery store.
So it wasn't next to the veggie burgers in the freezer.
Exactly. So we were the first to go into the meat section, and that was so critical because 95%, as I said, of the marketplace isn't vegan or vegetarian. They're not buying their protein in the freezer. And so that's a case where the buyer played a really important role. But the buyer only listened to obviously we made a good case, we sold it in, but the buyer only listened to that case because it was grounded in consumer insights and consumer knowledge. And also, obviously, it wouldn't have stayed in the meat section if the consumer didn't respond there. And then Safeway wouldn't have followed Whole Foods if it wasn't succeeding, and Kroger wouldn't have followed Safeway if it wasn't succeeding there. So it's all about the consumer. And having been on the receiving end, Don't ever underestimate the power you have, whether it's giving feedback to, in a restaurant about an experience you had, or feedback in a store about something missing from the shelves that should be there. It's really powerful.
And you're going to be joining us for food, so if they can tell you if
Give me
they like it.
I want to hear the feedback.
All right. Okay, one more question over here.
My name is Adrian Baker Kang. I think this mic is cutting out a little bit. We actually met at Entrepreneurship. It's good to see you again.
Yeah.
My question is around brand integrity and how you maintain the brand's mission and core identity, specifically looking at Honest Tea and its acquisition by Coca-Cola. How did you keep it true to its core mission and original identity of wanting to do good?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, the key is, and we call this mission in a bottle because it's literally like we wanted to infuse our mission in the product. Because what that means is Honest Tea isn't about, oh, we sell a lot of tea and then we give away a lot of money to charity because somebody else could buy it and say, well, we're not giving it away to charity. But with Honest Tea, the brand was built, as I said, organic, low calorie, and fair trade. And so that was in every product. And if Coke were to buy it, and that's why they bought it, was because it had those attributes. It wouldn't make sense for them to buy it and say, you know what, organic's a little expensive, let's move that away. Fair trade, like they bought it because that's what it represented. And with Eat the Change, everything we sell is organic. Everything we sell, we're sourcing in a certain way. We have made a point of avoiding certain ingredients. Like we stay away, there's 6 crops that are responsible for 57% of all agricultural production. I said, well, if we value biodiversity, let's not include soy, wheat, corn, potatoes, rice, and sugarcane. So that's how we formulate it, and that's the brand ethos. So you have to have an edge to a brand, and it means sacrifices sometimes, but ultimately it means creating value and sticking to it. And then the way we really delivered it, at least with Honest Tea, was that I stuck around long enough to make sure it was fully ingrained. And so, it's not foolproof. Someone said, what kind of contract did you have with Coca-Cola to protect it? And I said, I didn't even try because I just knew you couldn't negotiate it. But the best defense was a good offense. By building the brand and ingraining those values and making it large, it just meant Coke couldn't move away from it.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure.
So I'm getting the message that we need to wrap up here because
Okay.
I know everybody's hungry. So
Okay.
those who didn't get your questions asked, I apologize that you stood there patiently waiting. But Seth will be around at the reception, and maybe you can grab him
Sure,
in and
yeah,
ask a
happy
question.
to talk some more over Plant Burger.
Awesome. And so we are going to, in just a minute, adjourn to the 3rd floor where we'll have some delicious food. I can't wait to taste some of the
If I
change.
could, just one last message I want to just share. I've been talking a lot about food, but I hope what you can take away, especially if you're not interested in food as a career, is what you're doing right now in business school, in addition to gaining all these skills, is you're also developing your own brand, your own personal brand. And it means, what do you stand for? What do you represent? And what will you do in the world? And it's very easy. The default in business school is to go to the conventional, the folks who come here to try to recruit you are, I would say, the more conventional business world. And it's often values neutral work, sometimes values negative work, but often values neutral. I want to impress upon you that in your own branding decisions, just because we've just been talking about brand and the power of brand, your personal choices should be at least as important to you as any sort of consumer choice. What you do with your own,
And you spend a lot of your hours a day.
you have to live in your package. You can't. Use this time in business school to really think about what you care about, and then really insist on doing work that you care about. I mean, it's amazing how much time you develop these skills, but apply them to things you don't care about. It's to me a negative outcome. But if instead you say, what do I want to do, and what will I hold myself accountable for? There are a few moments in your life where you get to make those choices. And this is one of those times. No one's forcing you to do anything after school yet. So put some time into that thought and hold yourself to a high standard. It's an incredible moment in the world where impact can happen, where consumers are changing, where the whole landscape is shifting in a way. You don't have to accept anything as this is the way it's done, or this is what people do, this is what MBAs do, this is what Georgetown MBAs do. None of that should be taken as a given. And so demand a lot of what's ahead. And good luck.
Thank you very much.
Sure.